we good? All right, we're gonna call this meeting to order 1 minute late. It just flipped to 2:31 p.m. I was all proud of myself for being prompt, and now it's quite a That's all right. So, call meeting to order. And,
So early by railroad time.
I know.
But you're always late?
Plus or minus half a day.
We'll start with roll call. Today's kind of fun.
It's all good.
Yeah.
We get we at least have one new face, but we'll let introductions happen in just a moment. So first, Mr. Lindewood.
Present.
Mr. Amundsen.
Covering for Mr. Young,
Yes.
present.
Mr. Rudolph.
Here.
Mr. Hanson.
Here.
Mr. Van Hout.
Present.
Ms. McNulty. Here. Here. And Ms. Mormello is here as well. We do have quorum. And as you can tell from going around the room, we do have a new, Bart, you're not really a new face, so I'm not really there. We do have a new face here at the table with us today, Michelle McNulty, who is the new planning director, if anybody in the room has not met her. Welcome. Do you want to tell a little bit about yourself? How did you come to be at the city? Do you like pina coladas?
I do like pina coladas. I'm more of a whiskey drinker.
Okay.
They'll do just fine.
Fit in well.
And I was actually,
Flexibility is an important consideration.
and I was just having some serious issues. I'm like, well, it looks like Mr. Edmondson, but that's not his name. So I'm glad there was clarification at the beginning. So I am the new planning director. I'm not new to Anchorage. I've been in town for 11 years. I have 10 years of experience in being in the private sector for now, doing land use planning, covering a bunch of various items. Dabbling in transportation enough to be dangerous, and enough to go and visit Mr. Edmondson every once in a
I
while.
try not to be too mean to
You are always very respectfully pointed.
I have the tact of a thrown brick, I've been told.
Well, welcome. So Craig, would you mind making me?
Sure. All AMATS meetings are open to the public, and the public is invited to comment. If you have a business item, we'll have presentation by staff or a consultant. At that point, the committee will be invited to comment, and then after that, the public will be asked to comment.
All right, thank you. So first item before us is approval of the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Van Hout, seconded by Mr. Henderson.
A couple additions.
Okay.
I would like to, if we could, have a discussion on our air quality advisory committee seat from this committee.
Okay, is that gonna be, that'd be just, that's not action
It's
items?
not an action item, no, it's just an informational item.
Okay,
You could add it to the second quarter obligation report.
okay.
And I guess another information item on transitions.
Transitions.
Make sense?
Okay.
People moving to different places.
Oh, got it, yeah, okay. So
Don't
you're-
give it away.
Wait.
What's he talking about?
I know.
You're supposed to be like that, I'm not gonna say anything, and you already know.
Are you talking
Character.
secession planning? I know. Are there any I guess, are you moved and you seconded, are you opposed to the amendments or additions?
So move to approve additions. Wake up,
Jim?
Say yes.
Yes.
You still coming out.
I wasn't sure.
Sorry, I was in the middle of
Email,
email.
got it. Any, are there any opposed to the approving the agenda with those amendments? No. All right, then the agenda is approved with those changes. All right. We do have before us the meeting minutes from the May 10th meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
That you, Mr. Lindemood?
Today only.
Today only, yes. Seconded by Mr. Van Holt. All right. Is there any opposed to approving those minutes? All right. Those are approved. Moving right along. We have item 5A, our 2015 to 18 Transportation Improvement Program Administrative Modification number 19. Man, I know.
Oh, we'll get So another administrative modification, which again is basically a minor amendment. We have some changes in tables 3, 4, and 7. They're again pretty minor. In table 3, we have some cost overruns in the O'Malley Road reconstruction, so we need to move some funds into there. Fortunately, we had a reduction in the amount of funds that are needed for the Rabbit Creek repaving, so we're able to kind of offset those. And then we have a little bit more money that was requested for the Glen Highway Integrated Corridor Management Study, and so we're able to add that in as well. In table 4, we had some additional design work needed for the pedestrian plan project implementation, so this is an additional $141,000. Needs to be moved over there, and that's going to be reflected in the observation report when we go to that later. And then the other changes are reflected, are from table 7, and they are for the Alaska Railroad. There we have some changes. I don't remember which pot of money that was. 53 something.
53, yes.
5307.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows as 5307 funded. So, just some minor changes again. Tables 3, 4, and 5, so in this case, 3 and 4 are part of the AMATS obligation. Table 7 is not, but is in the tip as railroads FTA funds. They just need to reflect it in there so they can utilize those funds. And the dollar figure on these require policy committee approval, so we're seeking your recommendation today to send it up to the policy committee.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
We do have, before Bart jumps out of the seat, the Public Transportation Department putting in a request for a grant. It's related to infrastructure upgrades, and the AMATS Policy Committee signed on to a letter of support, for that grant. It will be used to upgrade electric infrastructure in Anchorage's bus barn and maintenance building to accommodate electric buses. In order to apply for the grant, those funds need to be shown in the tip, and it's in table 8. So again, it's outside of our allocation. It's $1,067,000 in 2019. So again, they have applied for the grant. They have not received it yet, but in order to apply for it, it needs to be shown in there. So I guess if planets don't line up and they don't get that grant, we would just have to, in our admin non-bond number 20, 21, 22, 23, whatever it is, whenever we get there, we have to take that back out. But we'll count on them getting in, so the money will be in there. So just need to add that on the floor. It would be, again, a line item in table 8 in 2019 for $1,067,000. We need to add that money in today.
Not
shown
yeah,
in
this
the
is on the
grant.
table. But that will go, if we approve it, that will go, also be recommended to the policy committee to be approved as part of this.
Yeah, if you agree to it today, we will modify it so it will be in the tip that the policy committee sees. It will all be in there.
Got it. What would the title of it be? Is it like electric bus?
Low no emissions grant for electrical upgrades to the bus warm storage facility.
Can we have a longer title?
Gotta be an acronym.
Come the acronym first, and then we'll fill in the title later. So.
I still think my favorite acronym that I've created is the BMUFFLs. Like to be useful name. You know, that sign that's the BMUFFL. So. It's a really long name for a sign though, but yeah. Okay, so we have that on the table. Are there any questions about any of these changes? So we have changed to table 3, table 4, table 7, and now the one to table 8 that was laid on the table. Questions? Are there any questions or comments from the public at this time then? Hearing none, then I would like the committee.
Madam Chair, move to whatever you said.
recommend.
Review and forward to the
Yes, review and
policy
forward.
committee for
the-
approval.
Yeah, the changes and all, plus what he had, what's not.
Can we just at least state including the.
Including
Yes.
the transit amendment.
Since that's not in
Yep.
Perfect.
Are you
I'll
so
second.
moved, Mr. Lindadude?
I'll second.
Okay, all right. So who's in this room? Second by Mr. Emerson. Are there any, are there any objections?
We're number two. We're number two.
Then we are.
That was okay, it's not. Just remember the second last gets
It's
the
the cheese,
cheese.
yes, sir.
I can't wait until we have the MTP back before us and we get to make all of those. I remember some of those motions from the last time around.
They tend to get rather complicated.
Handling things, yes. So, please read back from the record what I.
What I just said 5 minutes ago.
I move that we make column 3, column 4.
Yeah. I know. All right.
It only takes one or two of those to
Are we
really mess the
okay.
spreadsheet up.
So the next item before us is item 6A, which is the Vision Zero update. And I'm taking your presentation and we'd like to have
Yeah, you don't want to move.
Maybe. Rotating around, somebody's gonna fall over.
Oh, we got a new one.
Wow.
I know, it is. I'm like,
Here's a
that's
fan.
new.
It's like a spaceship. Isn't there a fan?
It's like huge.
All right, just go slow.
Isn't newer supposed to be smaller?
No, I think
Well, this actually can still see the falls now, so it's the, you know,
You store that at the bus bar?
yeah.
May not fit.
May not fit.
I know. Hey, it's nice. It's nice and bright.
Right, so I was told I'd get 5 to 10 minutes. The original presentation takes about 40. Go. So I'm going to talk really, really fast. I hope you can all follow. I cut out a bunch of slides. Here we go. So we are working. I'm Wendy Wilbur with Kittleson Associates, and this is Andrew Ooms with Kittleson, and we are working on the Vision Zero project for the municipality of Anchorage. We're going to start out with Vision Zero. Before defining anything, we are tracking 2018 fatalities. We've already had 9 pedestrian collisions this year, no bicycles, that are tracked informally through the news because KTU does a great job keeping track of these. Some of them are also tracked with DOT. We've had 2 pedestrian fatalities, 2 serious injuries already. And then we've had 5 traffic fatalities.
There was a bike.
There was a bike?
There was a bike. DeBar and Turpin.
DeBar and
Said
Turpin.
minor injuries. I don't think they even went to the hospital, but there was one. report.
Yeah, so the ones we can't track. The injured ones
Yeah.
is if I hear about them or they're in the newspaper. So
Yeah.
those are pretty informal. The serious injuries and fatalities through DOT and the news we can track pretty well.
Yep.
All right, so for those of you who don't know, Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries. So it sounds a little bit like we're chasing those fatalities, but we're also looking at all collisions because if we have a pattern of collision somewhere, then we know where we have a problem. But it's a little bit different than a lot of the other initiatives. We're, for the most part, just looking at those fatalities and serious injuries. And it's the premise that our roads should be safe for everyone, all modes, all the time. So this is an action plan. We're data driven. We heard some, how can we have it out in the public? There was a whole public outreach program before we took over. And one of the needs I've identified is we need data. What's really happening out there? So what we're answering is who, where, how, why, and when. We're looking at the codes to see if the code should be rewritten. And we're identifying priority locations and countermeasures. How can we solve the problem? And then the next phase is actually being led by Agnew Beck, and they will do a public media campaign focused on what we found. And I really forgot to introduce Holly from Huddle, who is also on our team helping with the code assessment and public involvement and just kind of input on everything as well. It's because I rushed. So data. We've got data from DOT from 2010 to 2014. We're relying heavily on this because it's all geocoded. That means we know exactly where it happened. We've got Alaska Trauma Registry data. This has proven really interesting. It's a confidential data source, but it tells us everyone who walked into the hospital with a traffic-related injury. Bicycle and walking in the United States benchmarking report, Municipality of Anchorage crash data, fatal accident reporting system, and news reports. So what's going on? The big picture.
Fatalities by mode. The gray is vehicle, the orange is pedestrian, and the yellow is bicycle. It's interesting that Bike Anchorage is the one that brought the Vision Zero. They pursued the grant and they brought it to Anchorage. We haven't had a bicycle fatality except in 2011, 13, and 14. So that's some good news. Bad news is pedestrian fatalities continue to climb. Who? So 1 in 1,000 car crashes resulted in a fatality, 1 in 200 bicycle crashes, 1 in 50 motorcycle, and 1 in 22 pedestrian crashes. And what the Alaska Trauma Registry data tells us is Alaska Native population are overrepresented in pedestrian crashes, white males in motorcycle crashes, which is probably no surprise. And then in the age group, you sort of see that 19 to 20-year-old are a little bit overrepresented in all fatalities. And then you see the midlife crisis in both males and females around that 40 to 50 age group are starting to see an increase in accidents, crashes. Where are they happening? It's no surprise they're happening on our faster roads. They're happening on our arterials in the 40 to 50 mile per hour range. A key tenet of Vision Zero is speed kills. And that's just basic physics. Crash location by mode. So here to orient you, blue is intersection, the brownish is driveway, the yellow is at an interchange, and the green is at a non-intersection. So for pedestrians, 25% are at traffic signals, 33% of the fatalities and severe injuries for bicyclists are also at traffic signals. Bicycles are also, you're seeing a lot in the driveway area as well. So we're getting pretty deep into the data, and like I said, Andrew and I could take you for another 2 hours through all the different data points, but easy. So if you have questions as we're going, until Craig pulls the hook, you can ask him. So as part of this, we're identifying the high crash corridors. And again, this is where there's fatalities and serious injuries. But Andrew also went deep into all collisions. Because like I said earlier, if you're having a pattern of collisions, you're more likely to end up with a fatality or a serious injury. So this is Andrew's magic of going through hours and hours of data and mapping these high injury corridors, crash corridors. I'll just lay it out there. It's an interesting conundrum for us. This is a municipality of Anchorage project, and most of our high crash corridors are DOT facilities. And we have met with Scott Thomas. We've aligned his data with our data. Everything's in alignment. We've also met with Stephanie just to really make sure we're validating all this. And it's no surprise, it's the Northern Lights AMC's corridor, a little bit by 36th and the new Seward. We've got some downtown, and then Muldoon Road. And I was surprised out here by Diamond. Diamond doesn't look so good. You don't think of that as much, at least I didn't. When are they happening? I'm going to Andrew talk for a while.
Sounds good.
But you have to talk.
I will talk fast. So car crashes pretty steady throughout. Motorcycles, of course, happen in the summer. This is a little bit older data, so we're seeing bike crashes mostly in the summer as well. Pedestrians, a bit flat. The most interesting is this bump right here for pedestrians and bicycles. When we get those fall months where folks are still out, but the weather's getting a little darker. By time of day, all non-auto crashes here. So certainly afternoon, evening bias for fatal and severe injuries, as well as late night, especially for pedestrian. Otherwise, it follows a typical kind of daily volume profile for vehicles at least. Again, roadway lighting, all pedestrian bicycle crashes. What we're seeing obviously is summer when people are out. Lots of crashes, nearly all crashes are daylight. But here's that bump I was talking about in September, October, where things are dark and there's still activity.
The light back on the bike.
So looking at why, obviously alcohol and drugs is talked about a lot in this area. What we're seeing is about a third of fatalities involved alcohol and drugs, and 18% of severe injuries. 9 out of 23 pedestrian fatalities in our data set that was reported include alcohol or drugs.
And that kind of debunks the myth that every pedestrian that gets hit has an alcohol problem, and that's not what the data is showing, only 9 out of 23.
And half of bicycle crashes, one was the cyclist, one was the driver. So looking into how, this is crash type. First off, dividing pedestrian and bicycle crashes off as their own type on the left side here. What we're seeing is ankle crashes are the most fatal and severe crashes of the ankle crash type. 38% were left turns, 27% were broadside, possibly red light running crashes. That's something we're digging into more.
And Scott Thomas's take on that statistic was somebody didn't follow the signal. Somebody broke the law. There was a traffic violation there.
So either a stop sign, a permitted left turn, or running red light.
All right, so part of this task is, what's happening, national best measures. Vision Zero looks at enforcement, engineering, education, encouragement, and engagement. So this is how do we solve the problem? And I think we're down to three key takeaways that need to happen in Anchorage. Engineering, as you all know in this room, you can't just lower a speed limit. You got to re-engineer the road. If you just post a lower speed limit, nobody's gonna drive it. So we've got to re-engineer the roads. We've got to have self-enforcing roads and take some steps. People are going to do the wrong thing. Our roads have to be forgiving, and that's a national best practice. Enforcement, and yes, I did get permission from Chris Schutte, who is our project manager, to include radar enforced on this slide. It works, but even more than that, a lot of talks about, is there any enforcement in Anchorage? And even if we have self-enforcing roads and roads that are engineered, without some enforcement backup, without the police out there, it's not going to work. And then education, encouragement, engagement. There's lots of different ways to bring the issue forward. Just as kind of a funny note, Holly took this picture. This is a high injury street for pedestrians and bicycles, but the sign is put up by a lawyer. So, I mean, we can be creative, right? There's lots of different opportunities. And this is just kind of a fun one. This was from a Vision Zero plan. The community wanted to do something at this intersection. There was no funding. So they did a community pilot project. And they painted the streets, they made their own art just to raise awareness and to see how it would look, kind of an unofficial project. And then culture, arts, and wayfinding. A lot of communities are looking at how to bring pedestrian and bicycle scale back to the streets. So there's a pet scramble in Oakland, they're wrapping utility boxes, just trying to bring it back to a place for people. And I think that's kind of a key takeaway from Vision Zero too, is we're not trying to move vehicles, we're trying to move people. There's been some just discussion. We haven't done a lot of public outreach. This is very data driven. We did meet with a group of nonprofit agencies who serve the vulnerable populations that we're identifying to get their input. But this is really about the data. And so public education is more about coming to groups like this, getting feedback, and not just getting general and anecdotal information, because that's not going to help us solve the problem and find the right solutions. But this data is pretty defensible, and that's how we're going to get decision makers to change. So we wanted to share it with you because the Vision Zero starts with all of you. If we can't institutionalize it, if we can't get everyone buying in and thinking differently about how we do business, we can't move the dial. And I think with that, how'd I do, Craig?
Perfect.
That was the best presentation I've ever given. So happy to entertain any questions. Yes?
You've got mapping of where all the crashes are. Are you at all engaged at all with the non-motorized transportation plan that's being updated?
Yes, we very much are. We actually just shared that map with them. And so they have access to our map, and we had a meeting with them. So we are coordinating, and we'll probably delay our deliverable just a little bit to make sure everything's in alignment. And so a key part of this is trying to make sure all the municipal projects are telling the same story. Right. Thank you.
You had an enforcement slide that was, I couldn't see the legend on it.
State your name for the record, please.
Sean Holland. So what does the red mean for?
So green are states who use photo enforcement.
Okay.
Red, they completely outlawed it. Oh, I'm sorry. Red, they have none. Green is red light and speed enforcement, and blue is just red light. And there is an indication, Andrew's still plowing through the data, that red light running and photo enforcement for that may help solve part of the problem. So we're still digging deep into that data. We also know it's hugely unpopular in this town, so.
And do you know, like, how our crash rates and our fatality rates compare on a national level?
Pretty typical. Pretty typical. Nothing really jumped out. You know, some of the patterns are just a little bit different, but it's not anything terribly different than what we're seeing nationally.
Statewide, we're very different, as you're probably aware.
Sure.
Within the city of Anchorage, it's typical for a similar city.
Yeah. We're not special. And like I said, if you want us to give a presentation anywhere else, we have a whole bunch of other slides that I took out and lots of other information. So this is just a taste.
And one thing I want to add is that what we have in the works for our next engagement opportunity, and this was just the start, is to hand select a broader range of municipal agency people who manage transportation projects to be able to start getting the culture of Vision Zero, like from up here down into the ranks. So that'll be the next thing that we do. APD, AFD, utilities, inspectors, people who are on the roads, transit, that sort of thing.
And they'll help us identify those changes to code that may be beneficial. Higher fines is a pattern for Vision Zero communities. But again, if we don't have the police out there enforcing it, it doesn't matter if you have a higher fine. So I challenge all of you to drive a little differently. It's changed how I drive.
I have a question. You said education Aaron with DOT. You said education campaign. Does that include also for the bicyclists and the pedestrians as well as motorists?
Yeah, so when we started this, we started focusing on pedestrians and bicyclists, the vulnerable user, and then you get into the role of victim blaming. And at the end of the day, through our focus groups and through lots and lots of discussions with professionals, we have a driver problem. We have a lot of drivers sit at a light and watch how many run it, how many make a free right turn on red without stopping. So I think the campaign in many ways is to look at, it's probably going to be more focused on drivers. That doesn't mean we'll ignore the others, but we don't want to get into victim blaming. Distracted driving is a nationwide problem. It's increasing, and as vehicles become more connected and automated, people are paying less and less attention. So there's an expectation that we may actually see an increase in pedestrian and bicyclist deaths. So it's tricky, but right now we're leaning towards the driver. Yes?
That does raise an interesting, John Cessla, AMATS, does raise an interesting question about the distraction, because I frequently see pedestrians with their phones and people on bikes with phones that are, potentially distracted. So it's multiple modes problem, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, there's a reliable element in the crash data that really flags that with much confidence.
Yeah.
But I think we all know that distracted driving is a problem.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there, I guess the next item for the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan update, is there a presentation or no? No, okay.
Aaron, AMATS planner, I'm part of the MPP team. Vivian and Underwood and myself are going through the model, the projects that you guys recommended for model, and we have to assign information about speeds, number of lanes, are there changes to it, signal changes, do general sketches of what the intersection changes could look like. So we're working on that, a lot of projects to go through. Next week we'll be meeting with Stephanie Mormillo and Scott Thomas to talk about those and kind of verify that the speeds are correct, that the number of lanes we're adding are correct, and that the intersection or interchange improvements, try and get some kind of general sketch, because we have to have something to put into the model. So that's what we're working on right now. We're hoping to be done soon, just taking a lot longer than we anticipated.
Are there any questions?
Oh, and we're working with transit, sorry. We are working with transit on all of their stuff as well. We're not forgetting anyone.
True.
So, I have a question related to, I mean, the TransCAD modeling does take into account, like you said, lanes, whether or not there's, what sort of intersection control it is, whether it's grade separated, whether it's signalized, whether it's not controlled, that sort of thing. So these are just like the general big concepts that are gonna go into that TransCAD model to make sure that we're having that,
Yeah, it's trying to make sure that the network that it shows before we do the running, the model runs itself, is actually correct. So we're mostly looking at number of through lanes, the turn lanes not so much. And so it's not every single project, because some are like intersection improvement projects. That's hard to model with the model we have because it's not a very detailed focused model. So we have to look at the high end, and as we said before, the non-motorized projects are not part of that. They're part of the mode split, but the projects themselves are not modeled. We're still keeping track of them and working with the non-motorized plan to make sure that they mesh with what they're recommending for their projects as well.
yeah. Any other questions or comments? Are there any questions or comments from the public? I guess one final, follow-up question. I know you're meeting with Scott tonight, and we're gonna be working through, do you have a target date that you're gonna have done the model analysis?
No, the model analysis, I'm not sure. It could take a couple months, because while we're doing the model analysis, we also have to get the cost estimates done. We also have to start with the fiscal constraint analysis. So it's a lot of pieces moving together. Thankfully, once the model is being worked on, we'll be freed up to work on the other pieces. So after we meet with Scott and Stephanie next week, as long as once that's done, we should be able to give all the information over to the consultant to have them start modeling, and then if they have any follow-up questions, we can follow up with them.
Thank you. All right, so now we are on to the general information items, and the first item is the second quarter application report.
So the picture there. This is second quarter, so we have to be within plus or minus 10% of our obligations by the end of the quarter. If you look at this document again, you'll remember that column B is what we have obligated based on what we have allocated based on the tip. And then C is what we've actually obligated so far or de-obligated, and then what we expect to obligate additionally is in D. So I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the tip, the additional funds needed for Abbott Road. I mentioned, I believe earlier, talking about the non-motorized, which are on page 2, so that pedestrian plan implementation, it shows that $140,000 in additional funds needed for design work. Nothing too spectacular to mention, except for we are tracking as we hope we are. We are within 5%, 5.26%. We have to be within plus or minus 10, and so we are tracking where we're supposed to, keeping under. So this is just for information purposes, I should say. So if you have questions, Aaron would be happy to answer them, because most of the projects are DOT. Hey, sure. I threw you under the truck.
Thank you.
What about Mike?
Thank you.
Threw you under the bike. There we go.
So the pedestrian plan implementation, I could have asked earlier, the additional monies we're putting in there, is that just to kind of look at the next priority projects?
That's to finish up some design work that they're doing right now to kind of get those done. There's not enough money for this tip to do the construction of all the projects we've been working on. So it's just finalize the design and then get them ready for if there's additional funding in later years with the next tip to kind of push those forward.
Got it. Are there any other questions from the committee? Are there any questions or comments from the public? Thank you, Erin and Craig. So the next item is one of the additional items, the air quality advisory position.
So, a little history lesson. As you know, this is an 11-member committee. And so one of the seats is the Air Quality Advisory Committee. And when AMATS was a non-attainment area for CO and PM10, in layman's terms, we polluted too much, so we had extra hoops that we had to jump through related to air quality conformity, and we had to model every single project as opposed to just, you know, the NTP as a big bulkhead every 4 years, and same thing with the tip. We had to individually model the projects. Every time we did a tip amendment, we have to do the model runs and conformity analysis on it. So when we went to the limited maintenance area, a lot of those requirements came off. And our Air Quality Advisory Committee, which used to meet every single quarter because we were non-payment and we had just a lot more work to do, they just don't meet anymore. They haven't met in over a year. So we have this seat that's sitting out there that we haven't had a person join us from the Air Quality Advisory Committee for, I don't know, Lori, probably about a year now at least. I mean, track who's absent. I never hear from this person, et cetera. So I want to get value out of the seat, and I'm just trying to, you know, Aaron and I have knocked thoughts around a couple different times as we try to figure out where to go from here. It would require, if we want to change this seat, it would require an amendment to our operating agreement, because the makeup of this committee is in the operating agreement. So I guess I'm throwing it out to the committee for brilliant ideas, because it's always nice when someone else comes up with an idea that is like, I didn't even think of that sort of thing. So there has been talk in the past of rotating that position amongst the advisory committees, the freight committee, the air quality committee. We now have a specific citizens advisory committee. And if you remember, the focus of this committee is technical advisory committee. So it's the technical expertise of, you know, engineers and planners, railroad, Port Alaska, et cetera. So it's those kind of technical backgrounds. So I'm happy to hear some discussion if you just want to think about it and throw ideas later. I just wanted to bring it up because we've been missing the seat for a while and not able to count on that seat for a quorum. And it'd be nice to get some additional input from that missing seat.
So Craig brought this up to me, and I said it'd be good to bring it to the committee, because as we get closer to the MTP, especially going into the approvals of that, we have a lot of work sessions and then a lot of approval meetings, and we actually oftentimes end up having interim special meetings to do approvals. And it is oftentimes difficult to get quorum, especially if we have one member who is consistently, we know that they're not going to be there. So wanted to bring it to the committee for some thoughts and discussion, because it could start to make it a little bit difficult to to continue to do approvals in a timely manner for the MTP if we can't get quorum. So, yeah. I mean, in air quality is not as big of an issue as it has been in the past, but we do still, we have some seasonal exceedances that we deal with, no longer non-containment, not having that, not that issue. Any thoughts?
I remember when we discussed rotating them before, and I remember we talked ourselves out of it, and I don't remember why.
I think the original thought was rotated on a 1 year or 2 year basis, and most of you probably remember when you get on this committee, it's a year before. If you haven't done anything with AMATS, it's a while before you start to understand all the issues. And the theory was, if you just put someone on here for a year, by the time they understand it, then they'll go, okay, now it's your freight committee's turn. So,
Yeah, and I remember that discussion, and it really is, especially when it comes to the time of the MTP and the process, of going through some of these bigger, if you're having every year having to re-educate and train that person as to what's even going on, and then you have these big decisions. Yeah. It's a tough one.
maybe just mull it over, think about it, come up with your brilliant ideas and share it.
My question, are you suggesting an amendment change or a change? How would you go about doing this?
Well, we would need to amend the operating agreement, because right now it spells out specifically, one of those 11 seats on this body is a representative from the Air Quality Advisory Committee.
What does it take to amend the operating agreement? Does that go to the assembly?
No, it's just a policy committee.
Policy committee.
Yeah. I guess question too is, I know you said the Air Quality Advisory Committee has not met in about a year, but have you spoken to the chair? Is there anybody else, I guess, from that committee that would want to sit on this committee or has the opportunity?
I have not spoken to the chair. I have spoken to the air quality staff a number of different times. And they kind of say, yeah, we just haven't had a reason to meet.
Yeah.
As you probably remember, Chris Salerno from the air quality group with the health department would come and give our air quality trends report, and he has since retired, but fortunately, Matt Stitchick, who used to work for the health department and left for a bit, is now back. And so the good thing is that he has a lot of experience with AMATS. And so he'll be able to hit the ground running in terms of our air quality conformity issues and when we do the analyses and such. But that committee hasn't met in so long. I can, the only member that I can remember besides Dr. Brown, who was the seat, is John Spring is the P&Z rep on it. And I know we don't want him on here. And he's
also goes back to
being
his
reappointed
vineyard.
to P&Z anyways.
Yeah.
Just gonna play his vineyard down in Oregon, so.
So is there any reason why we don't add the air quality staff person to this committee, since he's the technical expert?
Well, I mean, Ms. Fetco is the representative from the health department and, you know.
Essentially
that-
representative.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
This was specifically the air quality committee.
Gotcha.
But then,
Well, what are the other committees that would reasonably be in consideration? I could see freight, providing a freight advisory representative at this table.
yeah, so the other three advisory committees we have are the bike and ped, the freight, and the citizens advisory committee.
Again, when you start getting into the technical aspect of what this committee is supposed to be providing, citizens advisory or bike and ped don't lend themselves to a level of expertise consistent with what sits at this table.
They could, and that's the question of whether or not you want to open it to those, I mean, whether or not we want to accept applications and have to do an evaluation of the technical expertise.
Yeah, I think, you know, the bike and ped committee has 4 public seats, but then they have, you know, a disability services seat, a public health seat. So they have some definite level of expertise in certain areas aside from the citizen seats. The Citizen Advisory Committee has a member from each assembly district. So they're more of we're trying to hit all areas of town. So a little less of a, you know, kind of technical. I'd say there's more of a technical expertise out of the bike and ped committee. And then the freight committee there's a shipper, there's a hauler, there's someone from the port, there's someone from the airport. So they also have that technical background. But
Don't let the CAC fool you.
don't let So this is just an info item. Just wanted people to kind of think about it, and if you have suggestions, happy to look around, think about it.
That's the thing to do with this as well.
What's that?
Well, maintaining a quorum of 11 is probably a good idea.
I'm just asking if the seat needs to exist at all.
Well, you know, we try to make our all these committees to have odd numbers, so we don't have to worry about ties, but
Recognizing that would be an issue.
yeah. We can take 2 seats off. Not that I was pointing at you or anything. Brian wants a free Thursday afternoon.
How's the chair? I can
Right.
Okay, I guess if you have any ideas or questions or comments, please share them with the group so we can discuss and we can make a proposal if we want to.
Put something together for a proposal and policy.
Exactly. All right. Are there any questions or comments from the public on that item? State your name, Mark.
Andrew Ohms, Craig, I'm actually the vice chair of the air quality committee.
See, I knew I
know a guy.
I know a guy.
And I can't speak for the committee because we haven't met in a year, but I was actually wasn't aware that there wasn't a presentation, so for what it's worth, I would support going in a different direction. We've got a seat that's not critical or involved in the process.
You could take over.
I wasn't on that.
Did he just volunteer?
Exactly.
What you got from that?
No.
Sorry, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. All right. So the next item is transitions. I feel like it's like coded language.
It's like a timeshare vacation thing.
That's exactly what it sounds like, actually. We won't keep you for 3 hours, I promise. There's no buffet.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure, as most of you have heard, there is soon to be a new public transit director. Jamie Acton will be taking over that job on July 2nd. And so we've been fortunate to have her with us for several years now. And I won't say anything too much, she says she doesn't, well, none of us cry, but the nice thing is that she'll join the committee without really any training necessary for, as a member of AMATS. But there'll be a little learning curve for her over at transit. But I'm sure this group will all be happy to support her, so I just wish you good luck over there.
Welcome.
We're getting lots of new faces. I was looking forward to being able to introduce her as a not new face to the room, but new face to the committee. So yes, we'll have.
But also look for a job posting for a senior planner soon.
No stealing any VARs.
I've stolen so many people. from
Bart, what on
lots of
earth are they
lives.
talking about?
You have no idea.
The evidence sitting next to
Evidently,
me,
you just go
yeah.
back and
Fiddleson did it
forth.
first.
Exactly. Lock the doors
Musical
when the
chairs.
planners are Todd.
We've actually been having a similar discussion internal to the municipality as it relates to mechanics.
Yes.
Because apparently they're very hard to come by, and so they steal from other departments, and we're having issues with that, so. It happens. All right. Are there any other committee comments for the good of the order then? It's construction season, be aware.
Be careful.
Yeah, pay attention. And whether you're going north or south out of Anchorage, there's construction that you will come across. Exactly. I will say, I'm gonna make a plug. I drive Tudor Road a lot. And I have been pretty happy with the construction. I mean, and how minimal they're actually interrupting during the day. I've even driven in the evenings when they have the lane closures and stuff, and it is not, I mean, really, I was dreading it last season when I knew it was coming, and it has been a lot better than I was anticipating, so yay, thumbs up.
For those of you that are making late night runs down to the Russian to try and catch a red, be careful.
Yeah.
We've got Girdwood all the way down to the start of the pass is under construction. We lost somebody yesterday. We don't need to lose anybody else, so be careful out there.
That's what that was, that insult.
Fatality.
I have a comment. The 2018 to 2021 STIP has been signed and is official. I also have Amendment 1 on my desk here. And as soon as we get that, Amendment 1 is basically just a significant project for each one of the regions. Central Region's significant project is 100 to 105, Seward. And as soon as we get Amendment 1 done, we will begin work on Amendment 2, which should be out hopefully by this fall.
Related to that, I'm sure people saw the article in the paper about the governor signing the budget, and it did not include the money for Kindergarten Crossing, so that relieves us from trying to figure out what to do with the policy committee that said don't include the project, and then the project got added in, so at least we kicked it down the road for a year. We can continue with the policy committee guidance of not doing that project.
The MT update will not be in conflict when it gets to the fence.
Exactly.
I was gonna say, yes, on page 6 of 9 of our meeting minutes from last month, we were discussing that.
Yes.
So.
Thankfully, we don't have to deal with the challenge.
Exactly, because that's a big change for that. Any other committee comments? Are there any public comments?
I have one, just because it happened to me yesterday. I was driving home and I was waiting to turn into my neighborhood, and I turned in, and a kid came running down the hill from the bike path, ignoring the stop sign he has, and I almost hit him, and he didn't even care. So just a heads up, pay attention. People are out biking more frequently right now. Go a lot slower when transitioning in and out of neighborhoods because of how pathways and stop signs are, and because people don't really pay attention.
And the vegetation has grown up recently, so it's harder to see them.
Significant.
Very much so.
Oh, man, vegetation everywhere. That includes even if you're on the trail system. I went biking this past Sunday, and I'm amazed at how tall some Devil's Club is already. And I mean, because we had such a late start, and I was like, note to self, don't cross the path either side right now. Just joking with my husband, I'm like, if you're gonna go off, don't do it here. And he's like, ooh, yeah, that looks bad. So, I mean, it's grown up considerably. And I was just happy I didn't have any close encounters with the animal kind while I was out and about as well. So, something for everybody to consider is, you know, there's a lot of, you know, lots of babies, lots of protective mamas, and apparently bears running downtown. So,
Jogging through the middle of town.
And my wife saw that.
well,
She was right there.
yeah, I'm not really, I guess I'm not surprised at some of the things we see, so. Oh, I guess one final committee comment, not directly related to this, but very interesting. I spent half the day on Thursday last week and all day Friday at the Autonomous Vehicle Forum that was put together by ITE and ITS. And it was pretty fascinating. You know, I thought they did a really good job of showing both sides of the issue, the pros, the cons, the potential benefits, the unintended consequences. Because, you know, for every action, there's a reaction, you know, and when you're looking at some of these, the one I found particularly interesting is just when they're testing in Minnesota and they're testing on a closed track and they can actually like do a spot by spot and kind of track out where this, and this is a completely autonomous vehicle, where it can do a loop. And even in snow and ice conditions, its track, as it was running this more than 25 times, was only off by about at most a centimeter. So now they're talking about the fact that pavement quality, if you have heavy vehicles particularly, because freight, and you know, freight is one of the big things that they're looking at having autonomous vehicles, is that if you have that heavy truck loading on the same exact place on the pavement continuously, the issues it has with pavement quality. But I guess the cool thing, conversely, as I'm thinking about it, is if you have specialized locations for freight, and if you know you're gonna run them for lane, in a certain lane, you could,
White topic.
yeah, I mean, really, you could super insulate that location and actually only do it exactly where the wheel wells are going to be, because if it's that accurate, just do it exactly where you need to. You don't have to spend the money to reinforce the entire roadway system. So, pros, cons. I mean, but anyway, I thought it was very fascinating, the good, the bad, the ugly, and kind of the presentations. I think the funniest part for me, though, was just talking about how, like, a lot of autonomous vehicles are really set up so that if they don't know what's going on, they stop because they don't know how to react. And there was one vehicle in particular that it stopped at an intersection because it recognized there was a pedestrian crossing, but it wouldn't start back up because it didn't know what was going on. And it was because there was a woman in a wheelchair waving a broom, chasing a duck across the street. And the vehicle didn't know what to do. Like, you know, and I think most people would probably sit there. I think we'd all kind of have that moment, you know, of processing. So I thought I found that particularly entertaining. So some very good information. So, anyways.
It was co-sponsored by AMATS, by the way.
Oh yes, it was, and Kittleson, and yeah. So, but I thought it was really cool. So I just wanted to share the information. I'm sure more to come. There's more discussions.
And
to come.
all of the forums were recorded and will be available for people to watch later if you weren't able to actually make the conference.
Yeah.
So,
And I recommend them. They were actually all, it was pretty valuable.
Good
So,
stuff.
Yeah, it was good stuff. So, all right, if there's nothing else, then we will adjourn this meeting at 3:25.
So for now, we're safe.